We're here with Ann Wilkinson with Hands-On Health and Amoga Life that you can find at amogalife.com. Good afternoon, Ann.
Good afternoon.
Ann, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and your education?
I'm a physical therapist. I went to the University of Delaware for my physical therapy degree. I went to the University of Pittsburgh for a master's degree. It was really fun because when I went there to visit a friend to Pittsburgh, and just for curiosity's sake went to the University of Pittsburgh Health Administration office, and they had just created a master's degree that I honestly thought they made for me. I had no intentions of going to Pitt for graduate school, but when I saw this graduate degree, it was called LEAD at the time, Leadership, Education, Administration, and Development. And I love to teach. And I just thought it would be perfect, so I moved to Pittsburgh and got my master's degree at the University of Pittsburgh, and it was really lovely. I like Pittsburgh a lot. Yes. And then I happened to have met Her Holiness Saima.
Saima.
Her Holiness Saima, the most wonderful being that's walking on planet Earth right now as far as I'm concerned. She's like a living saint. And I met her when I was in an very advanced cranial class in Sedona, Arizona. And I just knew I had met someone incredibly special. And in my future meetings with her, became her body worker.
Indeed.
And she would refer patients to me, and she would guide me as to classes that I should take and places that I should teach. And it's through my meeting with her that I've traveled all around the world and learned many techniques from all over the world, and then shared some of the techniques that I've learned.
Yes.
In faraway places. And I got an honorary doctorate for that work.
Indeed.
And that in philosophy. I thought that was quite wonderful, and applying spirituality to medicine. So there was about a 9-year period that I was working with the guidance of Her Holiness.
Yes. Traveling
around the world and compiling information that ended up amounting to this honorary degree in philosophy, honorary doctorate. And then I waited so patiently my whole life. When I was in 3rd grade, it was funny, I met a man that sat behind me in 3rd grade. And I met him again, and he said, "You know, you've told me what you do for a living, but I'm not sure if you realize when we were in 3rd grade, the teacher asked everyone, what do you want to be when you grow up? And we each had to stand up and state." And I said, "I'd like to be a doctor, but I don't want to put anyone to sleep, and I don't want to give anyone needles. I would like to help people to live." I didn't know I was describing an osteopath at the time. And I've studied homeopathy for 25 years. If I were to ever go back to school for anything, it would be a certificate in homeopathy. But they made available to physical therapists a certificate in osteopathy. And why that excites me so is I knew I couldn't afford medical school when I got out of high school. But I also knew that I really didn't want to practice like doing chest tubes on people that maybe it would be my first time and I might kill someone or hurt them or cause them damage. And I never wanted to do that. I never wanted to do double-blind studies. I never wanted to withhold treatment from people who needed it to prove that my techniques worked. I didn't want to do surgery. I didn't want to give pharmaceuticals. It's not that I don't believe in it, because there certainly is time for that heavy artillery. There's certainly time that you need to go to an emergency room, hospital. I've been in the situations myself. I do think that people turn to that and give their power up way more than they should. I believe that there's times that you engage in that aspect and you bring on to yourself more problems. So it's interesting. I even knew then, I did as little as I knew at that time, I knew I didn't want to partake in that aspect of medicine. But osteopathy, you could only practice osteopathy at that time, and even though I still didn't know what that was, but you had to become a medical doctor to get to do that. Now, unfortunately, osteopathy was its own doctor. Homeopathy, they were their own doctors 200 years ago. the American Medical Association took them over, and it kind of is like when I was in college, I was allergic to cigarettes. But I noticed that all my girlfriends who smoked cigarettes were skinny. And if I tried to smoke cigarettes, I got bronchitis immediately. I couldn't smoke them, thank God, you know. But I found this one cigarette called a chocolate cigarette. Oh, it was so good, and it didn't make me cough, you know. It didn't, I don't think it even had nicotine in it.
Yeah.
But I could be cool like my girlfriends. Well, it was only around for a very short period of time, and then a big company like Marlboro bought it, and then it disappeared. Mm. And that's kind of what happened to homeopathy and osteopathy. The American Medical Association took them over and then kind of pushed them away.
Yes.
They don't really make as much money as the surgical interventions and some of the pharmaceutical interventions that actually create you to need more of them. Mm-hmm. Osteopathy and homeopathy, they're kind of like darts. They do their job and you're done. Yes. Homeopathy, lay people can do it once they educate themselves. So being that medicine is 84% of our gross national product, we're not really, I have to be honest with you, most medical professionals aren't really like, please go out and heal yourself. You know, I don't need my paycheck. You know, it's unfortunate, but really it's true. And as long as it's 84% of the gross national product in America, we are going to, want to be having a huge patient load, let's put it that way.
Yes.
Or maybe creating situations where people need repeat surgeries or are dependent on medicine and that kind of thing. So until we actually beef up and make more of the gross national product these health conscious things, and then we can wean our economy off of making money off of people being terribly ill. Yes. We're going to have to do this flip-flop. But Indeed. To kill 84% of our gross national product completely, people, that's why there's this kind of fear of self-sustainability and people taking care of themselves. Although, really, that's what real America, that's what real grassroots America was about, that freedom. And not being capitalized, which really in medicine we have.
So we have the freedom to choose.
Well, we do, but people have forgotten that. And actually, so when homeopathy and osteopathy kind of got squashed, not too terribly long after that, people started to not go to hospitals because they realized that they went to hospitals to die. Hmm. And really, basically, now you have to be a little bit nervous about going to the hospital. The flesh-eating bacteria and things like that. I mean, there's people who go in there, they're sneezing, and they leave with C. diff. You know, that's not a good exchange. But it was worse. It was very bad at one time. Yeah. So hospitals were going out of business, and people got fearful that there wasn't hospitals around in case you needed them. And also, really, who got afraid were the people who owned the hospitals, and they were people who had a lot of money and a lot of power. And they were very creative, and they created health insurance to give the public the illusion that they were getting something for free. And anybody who pays their own health insurance premiums now knows that that's really not true. And that if you probably paid your own medical bill straight up, you'd make out in the end, but most people.
I recall at the time there was a debate about this, and the argument that was presented from one point of view was this: if you think healthcare is expensive now, wait until it's free. And apparently the curing is not as profitable as healing. That for whatever reasons the system that is in place has developed, and one can interpret as one will. But there are alternatives, and you found alternatives through the practice of wanting to be helpful to others. I mean, you wanted, some people do healing because they want to be a doctor, but you wanted to do practice because you wanted to help people. And in the process of that, you found alternatives to the education that you had by traditional means. And how did that come about? What did you find?
Well, it's interesting. You know, thank God osteopathy began to give certificates to physical therapists, because the osteopaths that have gone to medical school, they get pretty locked into standard of practice. They make way more money doing that. They don't have an hour to spend on a patient. So osteopathy homeopathy and osteopathy didn't die. Truth never dies. So they have stayed alive and they have a heartbeat, but they got very kind of underground and quiet. And Then physical therapy also got very business oriented. You treat 8 patients at a time, you swap the ultrasound gels and the electrical stims and count to 10. Non-professionals are treating the patients, the professionals are doing paperwork because the insurance industry has kind of governed that. So thank goodness there's some PTs that, for me, I personally had to experience injuries and insults and need rehab and be a consumer from as a small child. I got to look at medicine from the inside out, and I do believe that that is where that my very deep-seated understanding of the medical system has come from.
A bit of empathy, perhaps.
Almost anything that my patients have come to me with, I've in some way experienced either myself or, for instance, one of my fortes is total knee replacements and joint and total hip replacements, the rehab of that. And it just so happened that I got a clinical while I was in high school, or while I was in college, very specific to that at Johns Hopkins, and I was working underneath the person who was number one. I've learned techniques to help joint replacements that 30 years later PTs still don't know. And they, like, I can rehab a total knee replacement or an open reduction, internal fixation of a knee fracture without tears, painless, where right now the standard of practice is to medicate the patient and forcibly gain range of motion to the point that you're actually traumatizing the knee. And it's fascinating to me that 30 years ago I learned a better way, and that's not standard of practice in medicine. So I think that what happened for me, I became a patient early on. I looked around, I saw the people suffering, some unnecessarily. Mm-hmm. I saw what worked for me. I saw what didn't work.
Yes.
Even in college, I had something come up. We were dissecting a cat. And I learned that whatever on one side of the body should be on the other side of the body. And I said, well, it's funny, I have a lump here, but I don't have one there. Lump didn't bother me. Lump didn't cause me any problem. It's just that I noticed, according to our anatomy, what's on the left should be on right, and I have something on the left that's not on the right. And I went to the doctor. They said, oh, it's a nodule, thyroid nodule. They poked it. They did all kinds of things. I got infected from them poking it. I got cellulitis. They put me on medication. The medication made me narcoleptic. I got hypothyroidism. I got hyperthyroidism while I'm taking 18 credits and working 3 jobs. Well, they entangled me in that for about 6 months until it was really to the point where I may not be able to complete school. They had my hormones so incredibly out of line. And I remember going into the doctor and saying, look, Buster, your time is up. I was fine before I met you. Now I'm not fine. So you see these little pills that you gave me? If you'll eat them for 1 month and you let me know how you make out with that, I'll consider taking them again. But until you've experienced what you've just put me through and you can convince me that in some way this is helpful, I'm not taking them. He said, you cannot do that. Want to see me? That was the moment that I found alternatives. Which, some people say alternatives, they think they're bad, but what's very interesting is that I was hardcore in pre-med. So at that point, if it wasn't in Grey's Anatomy, it didn't exist. I was very, studious. I carried books around. I had memorized Syriacs from back to front. So when I approached anything for my own health at that point, I analyzed it really from that point of view, and I'll tell you what I found out. Homeopathy had more quantum physics basis. It had more substance. It had more of a rock to stand on than any of the other medical things that I had been taught. I weighed it upside down as far as I could go all the way down to quantum physics, case studies, actual experiences. And I have to tell you, when you have an experience yourself, so in other words, if I go to a doctor and say, I took homeopathic such and such, I was prescribed that, I had severe, and this happened to me, I had severe allergies my entire life. I was 26 years old and I was given a remedy. And I was told not to take my allergy medicine anymore. I argued with the homeopath. okay, Buster, when I go to bed tonight and I can't sleep, then what am I supposed to do? I didn't just give the doctors a hard time. I gave everybody a hard time. And he said, if you can't sleep, if you've done what I've told you and you can't sleep, you call me. It'll be about midnight. That's okay. I never had to call. I never had allergies again.
Indeed.
So now if I were to go back to my regular doctor and say, look, I took this and now I don't have allergies, he would say, that's ridiculous. Don't you ever do that again. He'll reduce his credibility to me because the stuff that he had prescribed me my whole life was obviously not working. So it's kind of interesting. Like, I love chiropractic because chiropractic has brought a lot of holistics to our country.
Yes.
But I've gone to a chiropractic convention before. I would say 95% of the classes that they offer are on marketing and how to keep your patients coming for a long time and how to get the most out of their visits. And that's great from a business point of view. But I'd rather see more than 5% of the curriculum in an annual conference, be more about care.
Yes.
And if you are going to the chiropractor 3 times a week for the rest of your life, then your problem is not being solved. So osteopathy seems really to be a mixture. If you could take chiropractic and massage therapy and the old school physical therapy before it became more business oriented. You have to understand physical therapy was really a woman's profession at one time. Up until about the time that I went to school, men just started to get into physical therapy. So it was as much more of this caring and mothering and divine mothering energy. And physical therapists at that time did everything. We did respiratory care, whether you were an athlete or an old person, whether it was your feet or your nose or your hands or whatever. We treated that. Then occupational therapy came in. And so at that time, you would teach someone, an occupational therapist would teach you how to cook and how to put on your clothes and how to get in and out of your car. But the physical therapist still did all the other restoration. Made you strong to be able to do that. Knew when you were it's time for you to try to get in and out of your car, or that you can now walk around safely in your kitchen. So now you need to learn how to negotiate the kitchen. And you'd refer to occupational therapy. Somewhere between my graduating school and now, the physical therapists do from the waist down, the occupational therapists do from the waist up. It became very much a business. At one time, I was told to wear high heels to work, that the doctors would like that. The men would come in their 3-piece suits. We would drink coffee and tell the aides to switch things, and we'd be signing Medicare forms, 55 patients in a day. We went the wrong direction. I believe that we went for the stars, the chrome plate in the machines. You'll never replace your hands. We had to learn this the hard way. But I think that America has learned that lesson in almost every aspect the hard way. That you can shoot for the stars, and when you're missing the trees and the flowers and the earthworms and the earth and the ground itself, you're missing everything.
Absolutely, and that's a holistic way. Would you say that osteopathy is more of a holistic practice? You had a philosophy in your education as well as many methods of healing. Do you find that in lieu of specialization that's in practices today, that some of the alternative methods are effective because they're taking a person's complete mind, heart, and body into consideration when they practice, instead of it being extremely specialized through the microscope?
I'm going to tell you a little joke that to me really wraps all that up in a nutshell. So there's a scientist and he's studying a frog. And he cuts off the frog's front leg and he asks the frog to jump, and it jumps. And he cuts off the frog's other front leg and he tells the frog to jump, and it jumps again. And he cuts off one of the back legs, tells the frog to jump, and he jumps. And he cuts off the final leg and he tells the frog to jump, and he documents that the frog went deaf.
Good Lord.
So I think that this happens to us in medicine. And right now we're graduating a lot of physical therapists with doctorates. And they can do the studies and they can't have a conversation. They come out, they're doctorates in physical therapy. The physical therapy clinics are trying to save money because the big corporations have outbid the physical therapist. They've said, look, you normally pay $80 for that service. We'll do it for $35. Okay, we're going to write a contract with you and we're going to send all of our insurance clients to you. So now they have to have a new graduate who's the chief PT. Now the PTs don't have anybody who has any experience. They've got all kinds of research, technological experience. They have no hands-on skills. Nobody does, nor do they need them in that setting, because in order to make up the difference for the money, you're seeing 8 patients in an hour. All you're doing is mixing the machines around and mixing the people around on the machines. Nobody's one-on-one for an hour. Nobody really needs to know anything because everybody's getting the same thing in the room, whether you have a knee, a back, a neck, or whatever. So that's really, it's quite embarrassing. And I'm going to be honest when I tell you, when I introduce myself and people say, what do you do? I get a little bit embarrassed when I say I'm a physical therapist, because if they've gone to one of those settings where there's 30 people in a room and, they have a shoulder pain and they just put their shoulder out and they just treat that, when really the pain is coming from the neck. The patient knows it. The patient went to some uneducated body worker, of some type, and they cracked their neck and they all of a sudden felt better and they're thinking, oh my God, my insurance paid $20,000, never got rid of my shoulder pain, and went to all these professionals. And I just refused to go down with the bathwater. I just refused to be the baby going down with the bathwater. And I thank God that I was able to get an osteopathic certificate, because 200 years ago when osteopathy was created, God and nature were very significant. In the prescriptions, it would say to go to a creek and meditate for 20 minutes or to get on a horse and trot. Those kinds of things were parts of prescription. And when you read osteopathic handbooks, God and nature are mentioned in them frequently. Now, let me tell you why I think, and I have to tell you, I get ecstatic about this, but I feel like this is what I am alive for, my purpose. But we're in a body stocking of fascia, basically.
What is fascia, please?
Well, it's funny, we learned about it in physical therapy school, or when doctors really learn about fascia, it's this connective tissue that is underneath the skin that when they do surgery, they just kind of throw it away in the trash. They think it has no significance, kind of in the way.
A containing sac, they perceive it to be?
Yes, to be. But it's so much more dimensional than that. If we were to extract everything out of the body, you would still stand in your form of your fascia.
What if you took the bones out of the body?
You would still... You know that bones are just ossified, more dense fascia. Let me help you with this. We're in a body stocking of fascia that wraps around groups of muscles, that wraps around the muscles in the groups, which wraps around the fibers in the muscles that are in the groups, which wraps around the cells in the fibers, which wraps around the nucleus and all the components of the cells. At the same time, they have found out that there are microtubules of light in the fascia.
Indeed.
Watch this. If someone dies on an operating table, they lose 3 grams of weight like this immediately. If they're resuscitated, 3 grams comes back. If they die again, 3 grams leaves. If they're resuscitated, 3 grams comes back. So what is that 3 grams? We don't see anything. Nothing falls off. It has to be light. And when someone's dead, there is not light in their microtubules, in their fascia. And when they're alive, there is. I believe that the fascia houses the soul. I also believe that the reason why you could put an acupuncture needle in your toe and affect a liver, or you can take a homeopathic remedy, will touch your tongue and stop bleeding in the toe, like this, is that the system of the fascia, that electromagnetic. The fascia is wet and glistening. It has light in it. It can send a message from one place to another like this. It connects all those parts, yet separates them. It holds everything together, but yet compartmentalizes everything.
Yes.
So the fascia is fascinating.
Yes.
Now, osteopathy itself uses the bones as levers to get to the fascia deep within, to be able to affect the fascia deep within. Now, fascia also has memory. So if you have an injury everything about that injury is recorded in the fascia. The smells, the scents. I have to tell you, when you treat the fascia, there are times, let's say someone had a drowning accident 30 years ago where they almost drowned. If you're working on them and they remember that, they may burp up, the water will smell like seawater, or they may cough and their breath might smell like ether. They don't even use ether anymore. It's trapped in our body, and everything is energy.
Indeed.
So when you release that memory in the fascia and it comes out of the body, it may come out in sound, smell, sweat, heat, redness on the skin. There's many times where somebody will come to me for a headache, and I'll be working on their head. But I always work my way from the floor up, because if their pelvis is out of alignment, that's making their head like this and then giving them a headache. If I straighten them on the table, when they stand back up again, if it comes from the pelvis, they'll be crooked again. So I always make sure that when I'm done, they are in alignment. But let's say I get all the way to the head, and I'm working on the head. I might get a sensation in my foot. Sometimes I don't know if I hear the foot, actually sometimes it's like the foot, or I get an image of the foot or something, but something is telling me their left foot. There's this feeling. Like I said, many times I'll feel something in my own body. I'll know that the patient released, I feel it in my body, and then they say, oh God, that just let go. I already knew that.
So you have a sympathetic resonance for what is.
That's a good word for it. It is. Some people use empathy, but it's deeper. Sympathetic resonance. Really, to me, there's almost a harmonics, a frequency, a vibration, an energetic feel to that.
It goes throughout an interconnected body. And you mentioned reflexology. That works because of the fractal relationship of the body. Does this parallel the fractal relationship, perhaps, that may be in fascia that goes around the strands of muscles, groups of muscles, down into the nuclei, the cells, and so forth, and light traveling immediately throughout? So we have sort of a holographic body?
Look at the elements that they found beyond electrons and protons.
Quarks.
Ions,
pions.
The fascia it's electromagnetic, so it's dealing at such a minuscule, but yet at the same time, if you really think that the soul, the seat of the soul is in the fascia, if you really can sit with that light is in those microtubules, then how vast is the fascia? And then this is what, have you ever seen Avatar?
Oh, yes.
Do you know when they get on a horse or they connect, you know how they connect? And they grab them. I tell you, that's what happens when I'm treating, or when anyone, you can connect your fascia to someone else's fascia. I believe you could do it with a whole room of people. Energetically, there is a connection. And so that's how come I'll know, and I'll even argue with myself. I'm not going to touch the patient's foot. They came with a headache. I'm not doing that. Whatever's telling me to do that, I'm not doing it. Maybe I'm arguing with myself, whatever. It might be so pressing to me that I actually just graze their foot as I'm done their treatment and leaving the room. And they'll say, oh, I can't believe you just touched my foot. Oh my goodness, last night I turned my ankle, it popped, I thought it fractured, it made a noise. So could you just take a look at that before you leave? And then I really have to giggle. And like I say, there's nothing that can replace experience. So if you as a therapist are having that as an experience, now try to tell maybe a very conservative doctor, they might say to me, why are you such a good therapist? I don't know, I have this energetic harmonic resonance thing going on, but when it happens to you all day long and yes, over and over again, and that it still even surprises me, no wonder of course it would surprise them, it still surprises me. Because we don't really have a lot of models. I mean, look what I had to pick a cartoon movie.
Yes.
To give you an example.
But which became wildly popular because we recognize something true about that, and that thing that we recognize in that is ourselves, because we have this. In other words, if in order to treat a patient in a more holistic manner that considers the mind, heart, and body, which is necessary to go beyond the limitations of some contemporaneous means, then you must listen with more than your mind. Isn't that true?
What is reality anyway? There's one time I said something to Her Holiness. I asked her a question. And then I said, I'm starting to my meditative aspect of my personality is starting to carry over more into my reality. And she kind of laughed, but it wasn't like a funny laugh. It wasn't like, haha, that was funny. It was like, almost like, I feel sorry for you funny. And she said something like, I only wish that you could know what is your reality. Like, the place where we live, myself, and I'm sure I'm not the only one guilty of this, but where we spend most of our awareness and what we think is reality is absolutely not. And I think in the moments that we're so present to what is in this particular moment, right this minute now, that meditative pause, that's really reality. Where we think that's some place we just visit, that's a fantasy place we just visit, this place of peace and wholeness and vibrancy and complete wellness is just a
Maya,
fantasy.
in Sanskrit, they call that illusion.
When really it's the opposite. What we're experiencing, and next I have to, and that's really the illusion. And that this place of just bliss,
yes,
that's reality. And what we need to realize is that can be our 99%. And then we can just have a moment where we're like, no, I don't have to do that. Instead, we live constantly. And I think that helps me with my patients because I've been there. Because I've been, not that I'm the master yet, it certainly is something I strive to be. And then I have a person who has mastered that as someone that I've worked on her and that I've been in her personal space, and I've seen when things maybe go awry and how she handles it. Like the speakers are broken for the conference that we're doing in 20 minutes or whatever. And I watch how she handles that and maybe how I would have handled it or how someone else is handling it, and she reels them back in. So I have that as an example. So I have something to work towards, thank God. I have a mentor to move in that direction.
That stillness can bring you out of the relative point of view of things in motion, looking at from a perspective that which is familiar. But when you get to that point, then you can see how to reset the template and recognize the differences from that with which we were born, meant to be, and then have things go into variations and troubles because of our experiences of life. So you really have to go beyond treating the symptom to really realizing the cause. And to realize the cause, you have to realize what's supposed to be right in the first place.
You know, I feel sorry for some of my patients sometimes because they come in with this whole list of everything that's ever happened, ever done. They have the x-rays, they have all these reports. And I tell them, look, I have to be, I'm at the point now, after doing this for so many years, that, like, I'll be quite honest with you, I'm not interested in any of that. How do you feel right this second, right now? And I look over the stuff and I see what's important. I take advantage of this was fractured, this is not an infection, there's no tumors, that's great, good news. When I have a picture of a body and my patients draw their pain on that tells me more than all of that. And I see them at first kind of disappointed, you know, they have this story that they're so attached to. And I just do like this, you know, nope. And I think it takes a while. I have been very blessed in that I didn't think I was blessed when I was little and I had orthopedic problems or whatever, and I had to have surgeries and I had to go into hospitals, and I was like the only little kid who could run around, and the patients, that other children in there were in skewers and body casts, and, you know, I wasn't afraid when I was little. I was pretty fearless. So I kind of went through and I helped the nurses and I helped them, and also it was a little safer to be the one helping and not the one getting the needles and getting, you know, there was the times I had to switch and be the one that was held down and given needles and all, but because my problems were very minor, I also played the caretaking role very early on. I think that formulated. And then when I realized, like, I never want to get surgery, I never want ether again, I don't want needles again, I don't want medicine anymore, I don't want to feel funny. The allergy medicine always made me so weird. And, you know, I got to have all those experiences before I went to college. And then when I went to college, you know, you're too busy. And then I visited the doctor again and had to have this medicine for this nodule. I didn't have to, I found out that I chose to participate in that and then chose not to. And then I used things like kelp, and that's when I got introduced to homeopathy. And that nodule has never bothered me again. I had to use that stuff to take me back to where I was before the doctors interfered with that. And then in the 80s, this, is it Dirk Pearson? There was a man and a woman, and they had come out with the Extension series. And I read it back to front, and all about vitamins. I was way before any of that was public knowledge. And I was doing it to save myself. I was doing it because they tipped me over. They tipped me with these medicines. When you take medicines, it pulls, your body tries to get rid of medicine. So in trying to get rid of medicine, it also gets rid of your calcium and your magnesium and all things that are very important.
That's
your folic acid, so your skin starts to change. Well, when you're 18, you notice that stuff. You might be busy, but you start to notice if your hair isn't the same, if your skin's not the same. And so lucky again for me. At the time, I didn't feel like I was lucky. But I look back now and say, my God, what a blessing. And then I had a great big dog that I loved. He was like a person to me because he was 120 pounds and he was brilliant. So he was more than a dog. And he lived to be very old, and the doctor said it was because I never put him on medicine. And I knew that medicines would hurt his kidneys and liver, and he was very big and he played Frisbee, so he started getting like joint problems early on. And I had known a little bit about homeopathy, so I actually experimented on him. And that experimenting on him, I would take him to the vet, and I would say, he dove off the porch earlier this morning. He came back and he was fine. I came home from work and he was shaking in the bathroom. I touched his entire body and only this one spot. He yipes, but look at him. He looks like he's having seizures. And then vet would say, oh, they do that. These big dogs are babies. He tore his rotator cuff. And I'd say, thank you. Bye. And he'd say, wait a minute, excuse me. Don't you want to know what to do about it? No, all I needed was the diagnosis. Thank you. And I'd go back and he would have to alternate these remedies. And like 24 hours later, the dog would be fine. And the next catastrophe, I would go back. And then really the doctors started to get used to me. And then they started to ask me, what was I doing? Because he was 13 and a half years old, 120 pounds, in excellent condition. He had to have an emergency surgery once, and a complication was internal bleeding. And he got it, and I said to the doctor, may I please give him a remedy? And I came in with all my books, and I gave him a remedy, and he more or less said, he's going to die because of this complication. She said, well, let me please give him a remedy. And he let me. It's funny, he let me. Now things are different. But he did let me. And he called me back 2 hours later and said, your dog is fine, you can bring him home. And after that, he would call me and say, like, what do I do about this? What can I do? And he became a client of mine. And then the same thing happened when I had a child. And when I first went to take her to the doctors and I hadn't had her vaccinated and she had the chicken pox and you didn't bring her in and you're still nursing her, and they treated me very badly. And then they started to get curious. And then when I would come in after that, like it took about a 10-year period for it to change, they got excited and would say, there's this one class, I was wondering, do you think I should take this class or that class? And they started to really respect me. And the same thing happened also. I was using yoga 20-some years ago as a restorative exercise program. And I remember getting a call from one of my doctors, and he was saying, not only does the Jesus picture need to come down, but your yoga posters need to come down. It's really offending some of the patients. They think it's the Antichrist, and they're confused as to why you have Jesus pictures but Antichrist thing there at the same time. And it was at that moment, though, David, and again, I remember being in, if I went into what was my reality was panic, and I took them down, and my doctors aren't going to refer to me anymore, and my business is going to... But what happened is, in that moment, I said a prayer, and I said, God, please. It was only a couple days later. I was teaching a class, and I took my patients into like a meditation at the end of the class. And I was telling them that they're divine beings, and one woman said, we're sinners. And then another woman who was Jewish of faith said to the woman, you talk about yourself, but not me. And they started to fight. I said, oh my God, here I am trying to teach them to meditate, and I just made them get in an argument. In that moment, I said, God, please, I ask you to give me a language, that I could speak to all beings and take them to this place that I'd like to take them without offending them. And I have to tell you, it was only days that I met Her Holiness Saima. So I believe that she was an answer to that prayer and to that dilemma. She took me to Israel and India, and I found out that like my perspective of Israel, was that there was battling and fighting, and it was a scary place and all. I've never seen a place where women are more free. You can walk around at 4 o'clock in the morning. You can walk down a dark alleyway. Little children can open the apartment doors and go in and stay at their home till their parents come home for dinner, never even imagining. A woman took my daughter to a store and came home without her. I went into a state, I was screaming her name, running down the street, and the woman was looking at me like, and then she said, I forgot you're from America. I forgot, please forgive me. Here we never have to worry that someone will steal your child. I honestly thought I would faint at that moment. I was screaming, running wildly, looking for my daughter. And here we were led to believe here that we're so safe here and other places are not safe. And that in India they worship, all these false gods. And I have never seen a more holy being. I always thought that I was going to India to do service and to help them. And I remember one time being in the middle of this jungle, and we had gone from one village to another, and we put rescue remedy on this one's burn, and this one had back pain, and we lice shampoo on these ones and gave toothbrushes to this one. And then we were going to another village, and I remember thinking, there are so many people. And then we're only here this one time, and we may never come back again. Like, what have we done, really? Tomorrow someone else will be burned, and someone else will have lice, and someone... And at the same time, this little group went by us with probably a little bunch of cows and, flies and everything. And they went by us, and the way they looked at us, and I felt as though I was blessed by them. And all of a sudden, I realized that I wasn't there for them. I was there for me, and they were blessing me. And these people who were uneducated, they may have been from our standards, dirty or unhealthy or whatever. What they were giving me through their eyes was about 10 million times of what I could possibly give them with my kits and remedies and education and knowledge. And so many times with Her Holiness, when she's taken me places, it's as if someone takes a telescope and then I'm looking at it the wrong way and I'm trying to find, I go like this and I see the bird in the tree, and then I go like this and I can't find the bird in the tree, and then somebody comes over and goes, and they turn it around and I go, oh, I had it upside down and backwards. And she has really taken me from such a narrow mind and so opened my mind. And so that when I can come to my patients from that, what I'm coming to them with is, okay, so they come to me with, I've been here, I've been there, I've been there, I've been there, and I still have that. And I come to them with, let's see, where are you now and where can we go from here? Like this hope and infinite possibilities that just my presence brings that.
Yes.
And they change. We call it a positive lipstick test in my clinic. People come and they are so beaten and battered and distraught and sad and fearful. And it only takes 1, 2, 3 treatments. And they come in and their hair's done, and we call it positive lipstick. They're wearing makeup. They're smiling. And I have to train my secretaries because people come in very mean.
Yes.
They come in very aggravated, agitated, and short, and I have to tell them, hang in there, you just watch. Just give me a couple treatments, just give me a little bit of time. And the patients transform, and I think, I have the most wonderful patients in the world. But it's everybody. What Saima is teaching me, that everybody is that. It's just peeling off the things that have been attached to them, the labels that they've actually grabbed onto. Fibromyalgia, which means inflamed muscle fiber.
Yes.
Your most uneducated patient could come in and say, my fiber is inflamed. I find that people have had injuries from long, long ago, and they were not attended to. Guess what they get? Fibromyalgia. Because let's say my ankle was taken out. Say my ankle was taken out in high school.
Yes.
And I'm not walking right over years, but I'm young. I'm 20 years old. You're invincible. You could walk funny for 10 years. using all kinds of extra energy because you're not streamlined.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Your body taking a heavier hit on the right side, that right leg taking more, you can do that for a while, and then all of a sudden that cartwheel starts to, give. And then they're getting pain here and there, and headaches and jaw pain, and, then someone asks them, do you really love your husband? But if you look at them and you see them in their underwear or bathing suit, and you see them standing, you look at them and you say, my goodness, one ankle's completely collapsed. When did that? Well, that happened 20 years ago. My doctor said that has nothing to do with that. In 6 weeks, that musculoskeletal pain was healed. Let me just put a little correction under that ankle, and let's see what that does to your back and your neck. And you might put something under there, and then all of a sudden their back is straight and their head's straight. Do you have a headache right now? No, it's gone. So how do we restore that normal alignment from the ground up?
Yes.
And that's my job. And then their fibromyalgia is gone. All of a sudden, by the time I ever get to their headache, it's gone.
So we need to step back and see the canvas sometimes. I mean, have we lost our simplicity? Comedian Henny Youngman used to tell a joke. I go to the doctor and say, doctor, it hurts when I do this. He says, don't do this. I don't think the doctors today might have said that. Here in our contemporary Western culture, we've done some things very well. We've have division of labor that produced the assembly line, and we can produce a lot of automobiles, but our body's a little more sophisticated, a little bit more organic than automobiles. And so do we really, the alternatives in medicine outspent, in the 1990s, outspent all other forms of traditional medicine put together because people were looking for it. And then it became complementary medicine, became integrated medicine. So there was a demand more and more as people wanted to find things that work. And so you mentioned about memory of the fascia, and that a person can have a memory injury come back and have residual effects from the ankle that affect the hips, have the balance, even the tilt of the neck and so forth. So have we lost our simplicity? You've got to recognize that it's an interconnected body, where mind, heart, and body all put together, that memory can exist in more than the mind. So maybe we have to use more than the mind to do the treatment. There was a rather publicized case somewhat recently of a young woman who had a heart transplant. And after the transplant, she survived, thank God. And traditional medicine has given us some miracles.
Yes, it's very
But unfortunately, since the era of bloodletting and leeches, those miracles have been discovered through the course of trial and error, and we've been the guinea pigs. And today, some of the things we're doing are going to be looked upon the way that we see leeches and bloodletting. But in the case of this miracle, the woman lived. But after her heart transplant, she had developed a wish to watch sports and drink beer while sitting on a couch. Drinking beer on a couch and watching sports. The donor, the unfortunate man who lost his life, that provided the heart for her to survive, had a habit of drinking beer, sitting on the couch, and watching sports. So can memory take place in more than the mind? Are we really interconnected? Is it a holographic? Is it a fractal relationship in the body? Does it take more than ideas to treat the body?
I read a statistic, and I wish I could quote it very specifically, but there's actually more neurons in our heart than are in our brain.
Indeed.
And so I tell my patients a lot of times when I talk to them about their posture, I tell them to make their heart enter a room before their nose. But it's also metaphorical to me in a way. Let your heart lead you. And I think that's really what I do with my patients. Rather than going to my book knowledge and my head space and my memory to treat them, which some of that is. So there is some of that, like some of the techniques, you remember from a class that you took or whatever. But I think when I go to the patient, if I come from my heart first, and there is a feeling, when you do anything with love, love is almost, it's an energy of its own. It's not an action. Love is an energy that flows. And then, to me, it imbibes. It envelops, and it makes a oneness, and I think that makes me be able to feel in a way, to feel to know what to do with that patient, because now we're one through love, through my heart being what dictates my next move, that makes me hear or listen or see. It might be one little thing a patient says that I'm like, you know what? This isn't your shoulder. This is a rib. You know, that makes me almost like they'll say that I'm the Sherlock Holmes of the body, but I think that my heart is the detective.
Then would it stand to reason also that heartless practices are ineffective for bringing cures?
I tell my patients all the time, they'll say, I want to start yoga, or I want to do this, but I'm afraid. And I say to them, let me tell you, no matter what you do, if you do it with love, you won't hurt yourself. So if you do your yoga practice with love, and you might have limited range of motion, but you love your arm and you do your practice with that, instead of doing, I should be able to do this and I can't win one, you may hurt if you do it from that perspective. If you vacuum your house and you're like, and all the slobs that live in this house don't vacuum, you're going to injure yourself. If you're vacuuming your house and you're like, look how beautiful, I love when my house is nice and clean, and when my children come down today and they're on the carpet, it'll be you won't injure anything that you do. If you do it from love, I believe that you get a benefit, not only that you don't injure yourself, but that you actually enhance yourself, but that also that it flows from you. It fills the space. It affects the other next people who come into the space. So my students, a lot of times I'll request that they watch a movie like Water for Chocolate. And that movie to me teaches you that when you're cooking or when you're making something for yourself, even if you're going to drink a glass of water, what energy you're putting in when you're doing it. If you're like, I only have 5 minutes to eat, I didn't eat all day, I'm just going to, and that's a different energy than to say, oh, you're feeding your soul. This cheese is magnificent. It reminds me of when I was in Belgium. Oh, I'm going to just take a minute and eat it nice and slow. And if I eat it slow and it's room temperature and I let it melt, it's just perfect. You know,
and we learned this from Julia Child as well, who started the cooking show.
And what was she the embodiment of? Love. I mean, she loved, there was passion.
She cooked for her
loved
husband.
what she did.
Yeah.
And she loved her husband.
Yes, she did.
And so anything that we do with love, whether it's me as the treater, healer, whatever you want to call it, if I do that with love, if I'm in a mother role in that moment, if I'm being the teacher, even if I'm the one being worked on. So for instance, when I had to have a surgery, Her Holiness Saima told me to imagine golden column of light pouring on me. And I was listening to a CD, Alleluia, the song Alleluia by Robert Gass, like a chant that just played over and over again. And I imagined golden light pouring into me. And I tell you that after this, doctor said, I have never had an easier time. It was amazing how the surgery went. And I could, even like I said, I'll still be surprised by it, but it's amazing.
So your minds and emotions can make a difference. We found this with image therapy for cancer patients that were actually using one's own healing ability. How could that work if we're not mind, heart, and body put together? You love what you do. And as a process of this, you developed hands-on health. Tell me how that came about and what is hands-on health?
I do love what I do. I do love what I do. And it's funny because in my logo, the hands form a heart. And because osteopathy is hard to explain, although hands-on health came before that, but remember, I've always desired osteopathy, just not knowing the word myself, not knowing the word myself, let alone expect other people to understand what does osteopathy mean. So hands-on health to me, putting my hands on, connecting myself with someone else's fascia, following what that's telling me, what I may empathetically be feeling in my body or seeing with my eyes, or just getting in some energetic way, receiving information, and trusting and acting on that. But Hands-on Health was created over 21 years ago. My daughter was an infant, so that's how I know. I broke out into my own private practice because I didn't want to wear high heels to work and see 55 patients a day and get yelled at when my patients did better when they only did the exercises, that they didn't need the electrical stim, the ultrasound, and I would be reprimanded for that. I needed to put all that because the bill needed to be higher. And I started to realize that there was this conflict in there that I could not. I put myself through physical therapy school. I paid student loans till I was 42 years old. I did not work that hard to be reduced really basically to, it would be an insult to animals to say a chimpanzee, because I think animals are much more brilliant. I don't know what to call what they would ask us to do. Just smearing ultrasound gel on someone mindlessly and then putting electrical stim on that did nothing. And I knew it, and I refused to participate in that. So it was very scary to go into practice by myself. I was a single mother with a baby. And my practice exploded. I literally went to 3 stories. I was treating 120 patients a week.
Indeed. I've read some of the write-ups on Hands-On Health and the recognition that your business has had. I've also heard some of the testimonies of people that you worked on, something that I witnessed as you worked on them, and hearing them, watching them walk in one way, hearing what they say after they're treated, and walk out better than when they walked in.
You know, David, it can be, I did get very frustrated before. I've passed that state, but, you know, if I try to tell someone, they kind of, you know, they blow me off. But if they get an opportunity, whether it's through a class or they come in with someone or they actually have an injury and they get the treatment themselves, people are so blown away. They are so blown away. I get to see miracles every day. I get to experience that. It's wonderful. I get frustrated when I hear what the patients have had to go through before they got to me. The amount of unnecessary suffering. The fact that sometimes the caretaker is actually causing them more trauma and more pain than they already have. If their situation wasn't bad enough as it was, that the person that they... And the fact that the patient doesn't know how to differentiate, that they don't have enough knowledge base, they don't have enough information, that even if they could gather the information, they don't even know how to process it to make a choice. So I really think at this point where medicine has gotten to the place where people are trying to tempt doctors by creating conflicts of interest, kickbacks, things like that, or just getting in their face constantly with huge marketing schemes, really spending quite a bit of money and energy on that. I think that we're at a place where we really have to educate the public. And people really need to know how to make a better choice as to what they need when they encounter different situations.
The people who worked on have certainly learned the benefits of being holistic and using more than taught ideas. But you also teach what you do to practitioners, do you not? With your Amoga Life, which can be found at amogalife.com. Tell us a little bit about the way that you pass this on for others to be able to enact some of the results that you found with your patients through Amoga Life.
So Hands-On Health is the osteopathic physical therapy clinic that brings in patients with their prescriptions and the liability insurance and bills insurance companies, and is an expert. I'm an expert witness in court for patients. It's that medical model element of expression of who I am.
Yes. Yes.
But this need to educate the public.
Yes.
And even more so educate the practitioners, because if I can educate 10 practitioners to treat a knee without having to have someone take pain medication before they come in, without actually injuring the knee so that they walk in but need crutches to get out, if I can teach 10 therapists how to do that, I'm going to now affect 2,000 patients. So this need to educate, this desire to educate the public so that they can make clear choices, and then educate more practitioners so the patients have more opportunity to hit a therapist that's treating with their heart and with better technique.
Yes.
Amoga Life was formed as the education. Amoga Life is technically an educational institute for 2 reasons. to show a patient how to support the work. So once we have restored their function, how do they support, how from an entire body, mind, and spiritual perspective, how do they support that alignment? How do they support that center path? The road is narrow. How do they support that narrow road of really being right on spot?
Yeah.
So Amoga is a Sanskrit word. It was a name I was given in India in a name-giving ceremony. And it means that there's no comparison, that there's nothing, that some things are good, and there's some things that are better than other things, and then there's some things that it's beyond. So why should every human being not have an opportunity to live a life that is beyond? And it doesn't mean, that for me does not mean that you are, Hercules, or that you're super wealthy, or that you're enlightened. To me, I'll give you an example. One time I was in Jamaica, and there was a very wealthy bar owner, and that happened to be sitting underneath of a cabana with me watching the sunset, and then also a young Jamaican man. And we're sitting in rocking chairs and we're watching the sunset. And the very wealthy bar owner says to the young Jamaican man, "What's it like to be poor? Are you sad because you're poor?" And the young Jamaican man looked at the wealthy man and said, "I'm 29 years old, and I've never shed a tear in my entire life. Who's poor, me or you?" So to me, a better than ever life just means that you're so happy. For instance, a handicapped child. If a child is born without an arm, when they're 21, they're happy as can be. They can do everything. If you're 21 and you lose your arm, you're sad. The one that was born without the arm doesn't know the difference. The one that loses their arm later knows the difference. So when I say a better than life, then you can possibly, it's to take that being where they are on this planet and have them be the full expression of themselves.
Yes.
To have them be able to access ecstasy, joy, bliss, to take away the things that block them from that.
In order to experience everything that they can, they have to realize themselves. And to be helped to do that, they have to be helped by someone who realizes themselves.
I see perfection in every being that I come across. And then I get surprised when they don't choose that for themselves. But I can see their perfect self. And then when I see them stray off of that, I'm like... So I think it's a gift to be able to see that in someone, and I hold that in someone. I think that's how I can get them, that I can make these corrections in their body. Because somehow I've been given a gift of seeing them in their perfection. And I hold that for them. At least it gives them a place to look. At least gives them hope that they can be whole, because they've forgotten, for whatever reason, their experiences or what they've been told or their belief system has taken them off their center. And that if I see their perfection and I can hold that for them, then I can see what things have led them. What does that really serve you? Is that true? Close your eyes for a minute and take a deep breath. Ask your soul, is what you just said true? I don't know if I'm seeing that. So there's a gift in being able to see people's perfection. I aspire to be able to do that to any fraction of the way that Saima can do that. I see her. I get to sit and watch her in darshan. And I don't care who comes in front of her. I don't care if they smell. I don't care if they have murdered someone. I don't care if their appearance is not good. Their appearance is exceptional. She treats everyone this. You just feel this love pouring out, and you can just watch that and watch that and watch that so many times, and before it becomes contagious.
You help people realize their potential by realizing themselves. There's an old saying, it takes one to know one. And if you realize the elements, the energy, the light within yourself, then you can help someone find that within themselves. to aid in their healing?
I work on this every day. And I start out when I wake up in the morning meditating. And I'm finding that my meditation is starting to pervade more and more moments of my day and my life. So I remind myself that I am light, and that I am love, and that I am light more frequently every day, in more moments of every day. To aspire to be what I've seen the masters to be, the Mother Teresas, the Sai Mas, the Gandhis, the Sai Babas, the people who have mastered. I've been so fortunate when I was in India. Ma has put me at the feet of several saints. Satwa Baba, Sai Baba. Some of them names I can't even say. I can picture their faces now as I'm telling you, but I can't say their names. And I just feel so in the most holy places that she's taken me in Israel. And to have that be awakened in me has certainly been a great asset. Now, thank God I have my education and a bag of tools, but also, Saima has taught me that I've seen her do body work on people, and as far as I know, she hasn't gone to physical therapy school. She's a psychologist. She's done that. And I've asked her, how did you know to do that? And one day she said, when I do something, I don't say, on page 47 of a book that I read in such and such, it told me to do this. She said, there's a stream of consciousness, a truth that's ever available to us. And I've learned to take it almost like a CD down. Right now, this moment, I'm doing this. And this is how I do that. Okay, thank you. And I put it back. And then in the next moment, if I'm sailing a boat, how is the correct way to sail the boat? And I do that. Now I put that back. How is the best way to cook this meal? And I put that back. How do you... So perfection, just like love, all that is accessible to us. It's right there. It's like right at our fingertips, and we can just choose. Do we want to pick perfection, or do we want to try it the long, hard way? Learn it the long, hard way, no pain, no gain. Do we want to stay on that belief system, or do we want to just tap into the perfection? Do we want to lead with love? Do we want to have every emotion infused with love, or do we want to try some fear first? Do we want to waste a little energy and all? Do we want to experience that and then remind ourselves to infuse that with love? So now what I'm doing is I'm trying to skip the steps of feeling the opposite, the antagonist. I'm trying to just stay right in the love.
And not let your intelligence be impeded by education. In the East, they might call that tapping into it the Atman, which is a collaborative soul. In more modern Western culture, we have Carl Jung, who spoke of the collective unconscious. Yet when we recognize ourselves, we can recognize that which we are part of and use that to help a person realize and tap into the potential of their own natural healing abilities, which you facilitate and which you help bring to light. Is there a message you would like to leave the listeners and all that you have learned and that you're practicing and learning every day?
To love yourself. Enough. To know your body and yourself better than you know anyone else. To love yourself as if you're your own lover, as if you're your own child, so that when you do go to a child, a lover, a patient, a teacher, a student, that you are 150% of you. That when you are loving with every fiber of your being. And to in every moment, choose love. At every moment, choose love. Because miracles happen in that place. Things that you can never imagine. Healings and things that you can never imagine. Healings of relationships, hearts, mind, soul, body parts. Happens in that space of love. So love yourself enough. Fill yourself with so much love that it's contagious, that people want to know, what are you on? What are you doing? And when I say that, love yourself enough to feed yourself healthy food. Love yourself enough to make time for you to exercise. Love yourself enough to put on nice clothing and clean clothing. And love yourself enough to comb your hair. And love yourself enough to dance and sing and smile. And like that William Farrell song, or the Pharrell Williams song, happy. So happy. I mean, give yourself permission. Da, 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 da. And, you know, just be love.
Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya.
Bert Baccarat said, all the world needs now is love,
Oh,
sweet love. And I think you're helping to bring a resolution to that. And from Hands on Health, Amoga Life at amogalife.com, thank you for sharing and giving some insights into the practice that you perform and the teaching that you do. And I, as a citizen of this planet, thank you as well.
I am so grateful.